The anime started with a young girl who is left all alone after a group of goblins attacked the carriage she was riding on. The goblins go to end her life as well, but a mysterious boy arrives to protect her. Years later, our protagonist named Laust is asked he would like to join a girl's party, and everyone around is shocked to hear that the girl wants to team up with him. Laust is shocked himself, so the girl points out that his sign is clearly asking to recruit people to his party. This girl insists to joining him, and she declares that she is a martial artist. Laust introduces himself as sort of a healer, but an employee of the Adventurers Guild rushes to stop the girl from making the biggest mistake of her life. Her name is Amherst, and she warns the girl named Narsena not to join Laust's party. Amherst reveals that this guy has been given the nickname the Incompetent Laust. He is a healer, but he only knows the beginner magic spell called Heal. He is a labyrinth orphan, and just like the rest of the parentless children, he grew up as an adventurer. However, even after all these years, Laust can't even use an area heal or a high heal spell. He is known by all as an absolute failure of a human being. Despite all this, Laust managed to join a party called Lightning Sword. That is until recently, when he was kicked for not being able to use detoxification magic. Everyone knows how incompetent he is, so no one ever invites him to join their parties. Amherst warns that Narsena will never be able to make any money if she parties up with Laust, but Narsena reveals that she already has plenty of money. Amherst panicked when she sees how much cash Narsena was just carrying around, and she explains that most of the adventurers in this town are gangsters. Everyone looks pretty menacing, so Amherst tells Narsena to never show such large amounts of money. Narsena graciously thanks her, and Amherst can tell that she is pretty new to this whole adventuring thing. Amherst offered to introduce Narsena to a nice beginner's party, but the little grifter says that she will have to charge Narsena for her services. Narsena surprisingly rejects the scammer because she has been wanting to join Laust's party for a really long time. Laust and Narsena to sign some papers to make the party official, and Narsena stares a hole right through Laust's skull. She admires him a lot for some reason, and she's relieved to finally meet him again. The little weirdo is startled when Laust asked her to sign her name, but she gathers herself. Laust pays the guild fee, and their party is now official. Outside, Laust explains that no one has ever explored the deepest part of the Marmat labyrinth. There are still many mysteries inside, and no one even knows who the final boss is. Many adventurers have dreams of finding vast riches inside, so they have gathered a Marmat city, making it one of the largest cities in the nation. Laust is a psychopath, as he wants to go to the labyrinth right this second, so Narsena wonders if that's really okay since they've just formed their party a couple of hours ago. Also, before leaving, Amherst told Laust that he could only take Narsena to the grasslands because she is still a novice. The labyrinth leaks magic power to a few places around it, and it causes monsters to spawn there. The grasslands are one of these places, but only weak monsters spawn there. It's the best place for beginners, but it's too big, and it's hard to find monsters. The labyrinth is the exact opposite, as it's filled with monsters, and that's exactly what Laust is looking for. He assures Narsena that they won't have any problems as long as they don't go too deep inside, and he can handle things if they get bad. Laust is strangely confident for a healer, but he says it's nothing, and they continue on. When they arrive, Narsena insists on taking the lead. She is a martial artist, so it's only right for Laust back her up from behind as the healer. Laust is happy with her confidence, but he wonders if she can really fight. Narsena quickly proves herself as she beats down a group of goblins, and Laust is thoroughly impressed. He explains that the guild buys the magic stones dropped by the monsters, and that's how most adventurers make their living. The stones are valuable because they can be used for many things, but Laust points out that she should know this already even as a beginner. Unfortunately, the magic stones of goblins aren't worth very much, so they will have to defeat more powerful monsters if they want to make the big bucks. The two will agree to go deeper into the dungeon to earn more cash, and Narsena, who vows to protect the weak healer if anything happens. Moments later, Laust is the one protecting Narsena as he stops her from stepping on a trap. He shows her where her grave was just about to be, and he explains that he was able to save her because he noticed a different color tiles. Finding traps is usually a thief's job, so Narsena wonders how Laust was able to do it as a healer. Laust simply explains that he has been an adventurer for a really long time, so he has picked up a couple skills here and there. Deeper in the dungeon, the two spot half-orcs, but it shouldn't be at this level of the dungeon. Half-orcs are known as mid-level demons, and their robust bodies make them very difficult to beat. Their power is equal to monsters on the lower levels of the labyrinth, so they should never appear in the upper levels. Narsena wonders if this is the time to run away, but Laust is confident that they can defeat it if they work together. Laust doesn't want to force her, but she surprisingly agrees as she trusts his judgment. Narsena starts off the fight, but she is startled when her first attack makes her feel like he's kicking a brick wall. Luckily, the beast is pretty slow, but Narsena still ends up taking some damage. The fight quickly goes bad for her as she is cornered, but to be surprisingly isn't able to finish her off. Just then Narsena can only stare in amazement as she sees the Laust rescued her just in time by plunging his sword right into the orc's chest. Laust is glad to see the Narsena was okay, but she can only wonder if Laust is really just a healer. Laust brushes the question off again and explains that his years of working as an adventurer have led to him learning a few close combat techniques. Narsena says that his attack didn't seem like a simple technique, but Laust distracts her by pointing out that she is injured. Narsena isn't too worried about it, but Laust is a healer through and through, so he knows that even the smallest wounds need proper treatment. Narsena insists that she is okay, but Laust steals her anyway. The magic stone left by the orc is much bigger than the goblins, and it has way more magic power too. This means that it will be worth a pretty penny. Laust explains that he has seen what he wanted to see at a Narsena in terms of her fighting ability. They have also earned a good amount of money, so they can head home now, but he leaves the decision to Narsena. She says that she can still fight, so the two go on to do some more hunting. Afterwards, Amherst is amazed to see how many monsters they defeated in just one day. Amherst realizes that Laust must have taken the newbie to the labyrinth, and what's worse is that them having an orc stone means that he took her to the middle level. Laust corrects her by explaining that they only went to the upper level. The orc shouldn't have been there, but this matches up with what the other adventurers have been saying as well. The higher-ups have also been very busy recently, so Amherst thinks that something is happening in the labyrinth. Amherst's mood quickly changes as she is happy to pay them for their stones. Narsena is weirded out by how excited she is, so Laust explains that guild employees get a pay raise when they buy magic stones. This is only true when it's the adventures they are responsible for, which means that the more they make, the more Amherst makes. Laust is shocked by how much the payout is, and Amherst has to remind him to split it with Narsena. Laust would never forget, but he is surprised because even after splitting it, it's still 10 times more than he has ever earned. Laust goes into a deep depression when he realizes what this means. Amherst explains to Narsena that he was just getting fooled when he was a member of the Lightning Sword Party, and they never gave him his fair share of the rewards. Narsena is infuriated by this, so she demands that the guild do something. The decision is up to Laust, so he decides to just move on because he is happy with his new party and he wants to forget about the old one. The pair leaves, but a mysterious man watches them. Later, the greedy Amherst happily consoles her earnings, but she is startled by the man. Hansam is her boss, and he just hopes that Amherst didn't help Laust find a new party. Amherst explains that she doesn't have the overpowered convincing ability that it would take to convince someone to join Laust's party. Instead, there was just a girl that saw something special in Laust. Hansam seems to know who the blue-haired girl is, but it concerns him for some reason. That night, Laust is surprised to learn that the word of him having a new party member has already spread around the city. The incompetent Laust is pretty well known, so him finding a fool to join his party is a big deal. Laust prepares to reserve a room, and Narsena is startled by the thought of sharing a room with Laust. Laust decides that they should sleep in separate rooms, but this seems to disappoint Narsena. The two head to their rooms for the night, and Narsena thinks back to when she was healed. Turns out that Narsena was the girl in the carriage, and that was the guy who rescued her. She was thankful after he healed for, but Laust apologized for not being able to do more. Narsena was strangely positive, even though I'm pretty sure that the goblins ended the lives of everyone else who must have been in the carriage. She didn't seem to care and just vowed to become an adventurer. Narsena wanted to join Laust's party one day, and she promised to protect him. Narsena has been training very hard since then, and she has waited a long time to be with Laust. When she heard that Laust was kicked from his party, she immediately rushed to the city. The little stalker is pleased to see that her plan has worked perfectly. She formed a party with Laust, and they even defeated an orc. She is doing it all for him, so she becomes depressed when she thinks about how Laust didn't even recognize who she was. That's understandable since her appearance has changed so much, but that isn't all that has changed. Laust is much stronger than before, and he doesn't seem to need her protection. Narsena snaps herself out of her depression and reminds herself that she promised to protect Laust no matter what. The remotivated Narsena prepares for bed, but one thing still doesn't make sense to her. She can't figure out why people would call Laust incompetent when he is actually really powerful. A look back shows how Laust's old party was in really bad shape after getting wrecked by a fearsome dragon. Laust healed the girl, but he could not detoxify her ailments. He assured her that the poison would go away if she just rested for a bit, but this just upset the girl. The party began to fall apart because the leader needed them in the fight, but the girl was in no shape to battle. The group continued to argue because Laust told them that they would need antidotes, but they couldn't afford any. The leader called Laust the useless piece of trash, and he told their mages to attack with all the magic she had. Her fireball only infuriated the terrifying beast, so the leader became frustrated by how incompetent the entire team was. He realized that no one would be able to lead a group of losers, so he retreated while recommending that everyone else do the same. The mage immediately took off and Laust helped the injured girl. Afterwards, Laust was kicked from the lightning sword party. He took all the blame for them failing to defeat the Hydra, and he was kicked for being a flawed healer. Laust pointed out that they actually failed because they were all partying the night before, but this just led to more arguing. The leader decided that the mage would choose who was at fault, but she was intimidated and the blame was put on Laust. Back to the present, Laust wakes up and thinks about how that wasn't the first time something like this happened to him. 6 years ago, Laust's title as the most incompetent healer had already become well known. However, Laust never gave up and wanting to become a great adventurer. A party offered to let him join, so Laust eagerly accepted. Unfortunately, it turned out that they didn't need a healer at all. What they wanted was living bait to attract the attention of monsters. It's common for labyrinth orphans like Laust to be used as living bait, but he wasn't even good at that, and the party was eliminated. Laust always hated pain and despised death, but when he saw a young girl in danger, he put all that aside. Till this day, Laust isn't sure why he went to help her. He fought the goblins the best he could, but he eventually got knocked out. When he woke up, Laust realized that he was not the one that saved the girl. It was a group of knights, and this meant that he was still an incompetent person. However, this was not how the little girl saw things. She thanked Laust because if it wasn't for him, then they wouldn't have survived long enough for help to arrive. Laust healed her, but the girl was horrified to hear how poorly he was treated. Her sympathy made her cry for Laust, and she decided something. She vowed to become an adventurer herself so she could team up with Laust and protect him. The girl was from a noble family, which meant that she could never be an adventurer. Laust knew this well, but her words still encouraged him, and he decided to continue trying to become a great adventurer. He eventually found a teacher and started training. He only learned the most basic healing techniques, but he also acquired many other essential skills for adventurers. Eventually, Laust gained confidence that he had become a great adventurer, and this was when he joined the Lightning Sword. Laust credits to the little girl because her words kept him from giving up on becoming an adventurer. He just thought about her now because he was thinking about giving up again after getting kicked from Lightning Sword. Laust is glad that he didn't give up though, because then he never would have met Narsena. Just then Narsena comes to see him and the two go to get breakfast. After that they head to the labyrinth where they plan to go even deeper. Inside they arrive at a teleportation circle, and it's Narsena's first time seeing one. Every labyrinth has one, and Narsena wonders if we can send them anywhere. Unfortunately, Laust must tell the clueless girl that teleportation circles can only take them to other places with the teleportation circle. Narsena thinks that teleportation circles should just be set up directly inside towns, but she realizes that this would just make it easier for monsters to attack people. Laust must correct her again as he explains that monsters can't even use teleportation circles. The reason teleportation circles aren't in towns is because the skill required to create them was lost hundreds of years ago, and there is no one that can make new ones. The two uses the teleportation circle, and they arrive in the middle level of the labyrinth. The monsters that appear here are very powerful, so they will have to be careful. They eventually run into some monsters, but Narsena's attack doesn't work. Laust explains that it's because she is fighting a leech and it doesn't actually have a physical form. It's a type of monster that transformed from a spirit, so physical attacks are ineffective against it. Monsters like this would be tricky for people like them who can't use magic, so he thinks they should run. Narsena refuses though because she is confident that she can defeat it. The two come up with a plan so Laust gets the leech's attention and there's it towards Narsena. With extreme training some humans and manipulate the power of ki in their bodies. Martial artists like Narsena who have practiced for years are able to do this. This ki allows the user to even attack spirits like the leech. Narsena uses this technique and absolutely destroys the leech. The two heroes celebrate but Narsena is hurt. Laust uses a magic tool that enhances healing effects and he heals Narsena. The magic stones found by adventurers eventually end up in the hands of craftsmen who turn them into magical tools. The leech they just double-team has left the magic core and Narsena wonders how much it will sell for. When they return to the guild, Amherst is once again amazed and grateful for the stones that our pair has brought her. After receiving a surprising amount of money, the duo heads back into town. They stumble upon a large argument and Laust explains that a lot of adventurers have been getting into altercations recently. Lots of troubles making adventures have been showing up and it's starting to disturb the peace of the town. Laust determines that there's nothing they can do about it, so they should just splurge on a fancy meal. Their waitress wonders if Laust can really afford such an expensive meal, but he just tells her to pipe down and get him some beer. Narsena wants to indulge as well, but a child waitress explains that they don't sell alcohol to minors. As feast, Narsena decides to ask about something she has been wondering. She saw a really tall structure in the town but has no entrance or windows. It doesn't look like a monument and there are actually several in towns. Laust doesn't know what they are either, but he did ask some of the townspeople before. The craftsmen told him that they're the ones building it, but not even they know what it is. What's even more strange is that no one knows who the client is that is paying for it. The blueprint for the structure and the payment was brought by an agent, and even behind that agent was another agent. There are a string of agents involved, which makes it very clear that the person behind it all does not want to be found. The structures aren't really bothering anyone, so other people don't really question it. Laust thinks that they should be making a city wall instead, but Narsena likes the city better this way. Laust points out that they are vulnerable to an invasion, but Narsena surprisingly says that there is no need for protection. There are more adventures in this town than any she has ever seen before, so thieves and monsters would have no chance during an invasion. Later the two had to sleep for the night. Narsena wants to say something to Laust, but she ends up chickening out. Narsena thinks about how she wanted to share a room with him, but she just can't get herself to tell him. Laust meanwhile thinks about how nice it is to be teamed up with someone. He wonders if the girl he met years ago will show up, but either way he credits her for helping them get this far as an adventurer. The next day, the leader of the Lightning Sword introduces a new healer to the team. The girl introduces herself, but the others aren't very enthusiastic. The leader's extremely positive though, and he declares that they will surely be able to defeat Hydra this time. Elsewhere, an ominous man is told that someone called the Sleeping Beauty is in a certain town. Hansam is the one giving this information, and he reveals that the Sleeping Beauty has teamed up with Laust. The man is concerned because they are running out of time, so Hansam must kick Laughs out of the city immediately. Later, the Lightning Sword group spies from afar on the Hydra that defeated them once before as they plan their new attack. The leader is eager to avenge the party's past defeat, and he explains to the others that he and the healer shall attack head-on while the rogue slips around the back and the mate supports them with magic. Lyra, the newly recruited healer for the group, rejects the idea because she can't possibly be expected to fight on the front lines. This surprises the rest of the party. Their old healer had been more than capable of taking on the frontline role, which shocks Lyra even more so when the group points out that Laust was the one that managed to sever the Hydra's head the last time they fought. Lyra can't possibly be expected to compete with that, and the leader tells her to stay back so she can just focus on healing and dealing with poisons. This leader is determined to be victorious even without Laust. One way or another the Hydra is going down. Meanwhile, at the guild hall, Laust and Narsena are turning in another impressive haul of loot from the dungeon. Amherst wonders if all these riches are really coming from the lower levels and if the two are putting themselves in unnecessary danger. However, Laust assures her that their small two-man party is playing it safe on the easier levels of the dungeon. Amherst suggests that they grow their party a little and by doing so grow their profits as well. Her intentions aren't selfless at all because this will also benefit their pockets. Laust agrees that it might be a good idea but decides it now is not the right time. He's happy with the way things are for now. They collect their earnings and realize that with as much money as they now have they can afford to rent their own house. Most well-off teams rent houses as their strongholds, storing loot and valuables that would otherwise not be fit trashed away in a simple apartment. Plus, as Amherst puts it, a dingy hotel room is nowhere for true love to blossom between party members. While Narsena's dreaming of other possibilities, Laust is reminiscing about his old party stronghold and how he was forced to sleep in a cramped storage room. Our protagonist Laust likes to remain positive, but he's really had a rough time. Speaking of rough, Team Lightning Sword is having a hard time themselves. Their fight with the Hydra went pretty poorly, to say the least. Bruised and battered after their failed excursion, the team is frustrated by their failure, at least the ones who can still stand. Margulis is furious and confused, smashing his fists since the table as he struggles to understand why they can't beat the Hydra. Meanwhile, Lyra is busy detoxifying the injured Amira while the others bicker. They soon begin to realize that maybe Laust, their useless healer who would complain but still obey, might have been more useful than they gave him credit for. Margulis decides that he will just have to go and ask Laust to come back to the team. After all, who could possibly say no to joining the illustrious Lightning Sword? A little later, Lyra's awakened by Amira, who's feeling much better after being healed. Throwing open the curtain, she offers to get the mage bite to eat. While rummaging around for some food, she discovers Siberia and Margulis have disappeared and wonders where they could have gone. Turns out that the two of them have gone to find their old teammate. Margulis, a truly shameless man, brings the offer to Laust at the guild hall as if it were a gift, all the while laughing and pretending their past abuse was just a minor misunderstanding. It becomes pretty clear that Margulis must have put all his skill points in gaslighting. He makes excuse after excuse about the team's poor treatment of their ex-teammate, and he promises that things will be different now, even going so far as to throw their new healer under the bus, calling her nothing but a useless woman. To the surprise of everyone, Laust actually thanks Margulis. Before another word can be said, Narsena, overhearing this, has had enough and runs over to intervene. There is no way she's letting a sleazeball like Margulis steal her partner away. Laust calms her down when he explains that while he might be thankful for the invitation and doesn't harbor any hatred for his former team after what they did, he still cannot accept. He will not be rejoining Lightning Sword. He already has a party and he's quite happy where he is. Margulis can't believe what he's hearing. He assumes that this blue-haired vixen must be manipulating Laust for him to say such things, and he blatantly accuses Narsena. This ends up being a step too far for the Banished healer. Insulting his party member was a big mistake. Laust, no longer his amiable self, grabs Margulis and warns him that if he dares to harm Narsena, he and Lightning Sword will be sorry. Laust's scenario then leaves the disgruntled and slightly shaken Margulis fuming. He rails at Amherst to find him a new party member who can help them fight the Hydra. He needs someone strong and capable who can stand with them on the front lines. This is when a mysterious new warrior emerges and offers his services. Unsure but desperate, Margulis draws his sword in order to test the stranger. Despite Amherst warning that there can be no fighting in the guild hall, Margulis charges headlong at the masked man. In an instant, the leader of Lightning Sword is disarmed with embarrassing ease. Victorious, the mysterious mess swordsman reveals his name to the Sieg, and it's enough to convince Margulis, so he welcomes him to the team. With Sieg's help, they will certainly destroy the Hydra once and for all. Later on at the inn, Sheila knocks on Laust's door. Peeking out of her room, Narsena is nervous that the other girl might be making her move on Laust before she does. It's a small relief when Sheila is there merely to inform the duo that they have guests waiting for them. It turns out that it's the rest of Laust's old team, Amira and Lyra. The two ladies are worried that round 3 with the Hydra won't go as well as their leader thinks, and they have come to Laust for his help. He was strong enough to cut off its head last time, so surely if he's there he can help defeat the beast without anyone else getting seriously hurt. Narsena brings up a good point when she wonders what is keeping Amira in Lightning Sword. Obviously no one on the team is having a good time, so why stick around? The mage explains that while Margulis has his faults like being a lying, cheating, cowardly, no-good, rotten, two-timing son of a gun who doesn't even brush his teeth, he's still their teammate, and she believes in that loyalty. This statement enrages Narsena, who points out that Laust was also her teammate, yet she still treated him so badly. It's enough for Amira, the breakdown in tears over the guilt she feels. Narsena is right, she knows she did Laust's dirty, but she was scared that if she didn't follow Margulis she'd be kicked off the team, the first and only team she had ever been a part of. She begs for forgiveness and Lyra tries to convince Laust that the mage is sincere, remembering how she called out his name while tossing and turning in her poisoned sleep. Laust, calm as ever, comforts a mirror and accepts her apology. He lets her know that there's no ill will between them, but that said, he's not coming back to Lightning Sword. It's a bittersweet moment interrupted by Miss Mary, the cook, as she brings an extravagant lunch for the team to enjoy. In particular, she thinks the little mage needs a bit of fat on her bones, or at least a smile on her face, and her cooking can provide both. Using the distraction, Lyra tells Laust and Narsena shuffle off to the side to discuss things in private. Narsena thinks Lyra and Amira should just leave their team, but it's not so easy. Laust, remembering the things Margulis said about their new healer, warns her that if she stays she's in for a rough time with Lightning Sword. Amira won't abandon her party and Lyra won't abandon Amira, which means that they are both stuck in their predicament. It's a tough situation and even Laust is feeling conflicted. It doesn't seem like there's anything either party can really do. Returning to their base, Lyra is introduced to their new party member. To her surprise, she recognizes their newest teammate immediately, meaning that his little Phantom of the Opera mask didn't help much. She calls him Zieg, but Margulis corrects her. This is actually Sieg, a completely different person. Lyra isn't fooled one bit and demands to know what's going on. Sieg does his best Kenshin Himura impersonation as he tries to play it off, but when they points out that his sword is stolen and belongs to Mr. Ronaldo, he loses his composure and explains that he inherited this blade from his master. Now how would he know who Mr. Ronaldo even is if they've never met before? This guy's shady cover is blown, but Lyra gives up and walks off, letting Sieg keep his charade a little longer. Besides, maybe having him along won't be so bad after all. As the storm gathers, both parties adventure forth, neither sure of what lies in store. Later, in the labyrinth, Laust is letting Narsena take on some of the mid-level monsters by herself, and she's been doing great so far, but all the moving around made her really hungry, so Laust suggests they should take a break and have lunch. Narsena is glad to hear that, so she brings out the food she packed, but all this seems a little too extravagant for just lunch. Narsena explains that Armia didn't eat much of the food Mary made for her yesterday, so this morning before they left, Mary gave the leftovers to Narsena and told her to eat it for lunch so it wouldn't go to waste. While they eat, Laust gives Narsena some more about the Hydra and tells her that his body is covered in tough muscles that make it difficult to pierce. It's also venomous and has got scales that deflect physical and magical attacks. That sounds really tough to fight, so Narsena wonders if Armia is going to be alright in a fight against a monster like that, but Laust says there's no need to worry. An antidote for the Hydra's venom was developed and is being sold in Mardat, so poisoning won't be a concern, but Narsena reminds him that Margulis still refused to buy it. Laust kind of forgot about that, and Lightning Blade is kind of screwed if they get poisoned, so they'll just have to rely on Layer's detoxification spell instead. He can see that Narsena is getting worried about Armia and Lightning Blade, so he assures her that the party can handle themselves just fine without him. Margulis may be an idiot, but he is still a decent swordsman when he actually puts effort into preparing, and Siberia is quick on her feet, so she should be able to avoid most of the Hydra's attacks. Any case has nothing to do with Laust, and this is something Lightning Blade has to handle on its own, and they'll probably be fine. Laust gets up and says they should keep going, but Narsena tells him she's getting sick of exploring the same labyrinth over and over, so she wants to try something new, and it just so happens that there's a swamp nearby, so she wants to go there for no particular reason and definitely not because she's worried about Armia. Meanwhile, in the swamp, Lightning Blade is battling the Hydra, and with his exceptional skills, Sieg is able to severely wound the Hydra, and he could have taken it down just now, but he chose to hold back and returns to the ground. Margulis asks Sieg why he didn't finish the Hydra off, and Sieg has his reasons, but to convince Margulis, he tells him it would be much cooler if the party leader was the one who slay the Hydra, and Margulis agrees, so he charges or to attack it again. Lyra wishes Margulis wouldn't rush into things from the front all the time, but Siberia says that's just how he is. Lyra has done healing her, so Siberia is able to return to battle as well, and from what Lyra can tell, Sieg is the strongest person in the party, but it doesn't look like he has any intention of joining the fight again, so it's up to the others to finish off the Hydra. Still, his previous attacks left the Hydra weakened and slow, so as long as Siberia can successfully distract the Hydra long enough, Margulis's frontal assault strategy will actually work. Armia is also keeping the Hydra busy with her magic, so if things keep going like this, then the team will eventually win. But just when things were going their way, the Hydra launched a rock and knocked Armia into the ground, then menacingly looms over her body, and Armia is so scared that the fear literally starts seeping out of her body. Monsters feed on the fear of humans, and normally you should be able to see fear like this, but it is visible because of an abnormally high amount of mana in the area. Mana concentrations of this level should only be possible in the labyrinth, but the Hydra is taking full advantage of it and begins to evolve. This is truly a frightening sight, and none of the others are capable of handling this on their own, so Sieg decides to step in. Lyra to take care of Armia and tells Margulis that he has to retreat immediately, but Margulis refuses to back down since they've already done a lot of damage to the Hydra, so it shouldn't be that hard to finish it off before it transforms. He leaps up into the air and attempts to slash the Hydra's head off, but once his sword connects with the monster's head, it shatters and Margulis is left completely defenseless as the Hydra prepares to counterattack. However, before the Hydra could land a fatal blow, Laust shows up and deflects its attack along with Narsena. The Hydra backs off momentarily and Sieg thanks Laust for his help, but he says we'll handle the things for here, so he wants Laust to go check on Armia since she's hurt. Lyra has already begun healing Armia, but the damage she sustained is severe and wizards are resistant to magic, so Lyra's healing magic isn't very effective. Laust offers to do the healing instead, so Lyra lets him. She doesn't see what good it would do since basic healing magic is still going to be ineffective in this case. However, to her surprise, Laust starts spam casting heal until Armia begins to recover. This is the most absurd thing she's seen all day, but Margulis and Siberia don't think there's anything strange about it, since this is how Laust always use healing magic, so they thought it was common practice. Lyra explains that not only is it extremely difficult to overlay heal spells like that, but she has never heard of the improving the efficiency of a heal spell before. Thanks to Laust, Armia soon wakes up and she's really glad to see Laust, so she thanks him for coming to help, but she soon passes out again. Laust is dealt with most of her injuries, so she just needs to sleep for a while to recover her strength, but just when Laust thought his job was done, the Hydra screeches a battle cry which loosely translates to, "Laust, come at me bro, I want a rematch." Sieg going to kill himself, but since it seems to be holding a grudge against Laust, he asks Laust if he wants to do it instead. Laust agrees to fight the Hydra, and since Laust is going, Narsena said she'll fight as well. Nothing Laust will get her to change her mind, so he lets her fight by his side, but only under the condition that she must retreat instantly if she feels that she is in danger. Since has been settled that Laust and Narsena will be fighting the Hydra, Sieg tells the others not to get involved in the battle for their own safety. Narsena throws the first punch to disorient the Hydra, and Laust follows it up by slashing at one of the Hydra's heads. Sieg also decides to join in, so B charges at the Hydra and uses his sword to slash off one of its heads. Margulis is amazed by this since Sieg is a lot stronger than he had initially thought, but even as Sieg is strong, he wonders how Sieg's sword remained intact when his own shattered upon contact with the Hydra. Lyra tells him that Sieg is using a special magic sword which is far more powerful than any regular weapon, but magic swords are extremely rare, so Margulis wonders who Sieg is and how he acquired such a sword. The fight goes on and Narsena attempts to land another punch on the dragon's sternum, but in the process she loses her footing, so the Hydra is able to take advantage and knocks her out cold. Now could just kill her, but instead it stares straight at Laust and communicates that it is sick of getting jumped, so once a fair 1 versus 1, otherwise it's going to end Narsena right now. Siberia can't believe the Hydra is smart enough to not only communicate off vibes alone, but to also know how to take a hostage. Laust has no other choice if he wants to ensure Narsena's safety, so he asks Sieg and Lyra not to interfere from now on. Laust then attacks the Hydra by himself, but before long he gets knocked down by the Hydra as well. That was pretty anticlimactic since Sieg was expecting Laust to be more impressive, but if this is truly all Laust has to offer, he is prepared to take down the Hydra instead. However, as Laust is about to lose consciousness, he reaches out to Narsena in an attempt to protect her, and all of a sudden energy begins flowing out of his body, and he stands back up to face the Hydra. Something is clearly different about Laust, but before the Hydra can react, Laust dashes forward and slashes of all the Hydra's heads in one fluid motion. Once the Hydra has been defeated, Laust loses consciousness again, and by the time he wakes up, Narsena is standing over him asking if he's alright. He says he's fine, but he's more concerned about Narsena's health, since she took a direct hit from the Hydra. Narsena says she's perfectly fine, but only because Lyra brought an antidote potion for emergencies, and that thing was expensive, so Lyra says she will charge him for it later. That aside, she asks Laust what happened to him earlier, but Laust has no idea what she's talking about. Just then Margulis interrupts and starts complimenting Laust on his strength and tries to convince him to rejoin his party. Laust cuts him off and says he's never going to rejoin Margulis' party, but Margulis keeps talking anyway. He says a lot of valuable magic stones were dropped from the Hydra, and he is willing to split 3 ways with Laust if he joins them. But Laust finds it odd that Margulis only intends to split the reward 3 ways, so he asks what means by that. Margulis says he's only going to split it for himself, Siberia, and Laust, so the other gets nothing. Lyra and Sieg are new to the party, so they couldn't care less about them, and Armia gets scared and hurt so often that he thinks she's useless now and wants nothing to do with her. Hints Siberia he can consider selling her off as a slave just to get rid of her, and at this point, Laust has had enough, but before he can do anything, Narsena beats him to the punch and knocks Margulis to the ground. Margulis begins bitching and yells that it's against the guild's rules for adventurers to attack each other, so he's going to report Narsena to the guild and have her expelled from the guild. He asks if everyone saw what Narsena did, but strangely everyone got hit with sudden wave of blindness when Narsena hit Margulis. But what they did see was the fact that Margulis and Siberia were talking about selling Armia off as a slave, and there are laws against that here, so they are both guilty of attempted human trafficking. Sieg couldn't possibly overlook such a heinous crime, so with his authority, he says he is placing them under arrest. Back at the guild, we find out the Sieg's real name Sieg, who is a direct adventurer of the royal family, and he had received reports that the security in this town was deteriorating due to the adventurers here. So he was sent out to investigate it, and as soon as he arrived, he met Margulis and Siberia. Lyra asked him what will happen to those two, and according to the rules, not only are they automatically expelled from the guild, it will be charged with human trafficking, which could lead to a lifetime of prison with forced labor in the best case for them. Margulis and Siberia start freaking out and begin pleading with Zyge to spare them because they can't afford to spend the rest of their lives in prison. They sound so pathetic that Laust starts to pity them, so he asks Zyge if he can talk to him outside for a second. Zyge agrees and asks what Laust wants to talk about, so Laust explains that those two may not be the most upstanding people, but just like him, they once had dreams of living as adventurers. However, at some point their dream changed to become top adventurers, and that led them to become obsessed with fame and fortune. Laust's point is that Margulis and Siberia weren't always like this, so while most people would have given up on them by now, Laust still wants to give them another chance to live as good adventurers, so he asks Zyge to let them off the warning this time. Zyge doesn't understand how Laust can be so forgiving, but since it's what he wants, he releases Margulis and Siberia, but he warns them that if he ever so much as hears a rumor about them causing trouble, they will never see the light of day again. Margulis and Siberia take the hint and immediately start running to get as far away from Zyge as possible. Once they are gone, Amherst asks if it is really okay to let those two off the hook too easily. Zyge tells her that even if they expelled those two, it wouldn't make them better people, so he will be monitoring them to see if this has scared them straight or not. At the same time, Narsena apologized to Laust because it was her that forced him to get involved and help Margulis, but Laust tells her it's all right. He may never be able to get over how Margulis the Superior treated back when he was a part of their party, but he feels a lot better now those two have left town, so he won't have to worry about them anymore. Later that day, Zyge meets with Lyra and Private to explain the real reason he came to the city. He was tasked with monitoring Mardat City because there have been an unusually high number of monster evolutions taking place here, and there's definitely some foul play at work, so he needs to get to the bottom of it. And to do that, he's going to need Lyra's help, so if he wants to form a party with her like before. Lyra isn't opposed to the idea, but she says she will only agree to it if Zyge allows Armia to join as well, since Armia needs somewhere to go. Zyge says she's fine with it, and in fact, it works out great for him since more party members means he can expand his surveillance, and there's a particular adventure that he has become interested in. Later we see that the 3 failures Zyge, Lyra, and Armia have banded together. The young mage seems pretty shaken up after doing so much child labor, so Laust congratulates her and the others on teaming up. Laust and Narsena then begin the day but heading to the guild hall. The battle with the Hydra has left them quite a few magic stones to exchange for cold hard cash, but Laust is more interested in taking on their first quest. He explains that there's more to being an adventurer than just fighting monsters. Hunting down important items and defending those who can't defend themselves also constitute the duties and responsibilities of an adventurer. He wants Narsena to gain as much experience as she can, and Narsena nearly passes out when she realizes just how much he cares about her. At the guild, the pyramid, which strained and venomous glares from the others. It seems news has spread of Laust's victory over the Hydra, and he warned his partner that there might be some dirtbags who want to steal their magical stones. One of these dirtbags named Marnell approaches Laust and asked if he has a moment to talk. When Laust seems a little hesitant, Marnell tells the rest of his cronies to go kick rocks so they can have a more personal conversation. Laust determines that this guy doesn't want his precious stones, but it's still a surprise when Marnell suddenly bows his head and apologizes on behalf of all the adventurers. Despite knowing what kind of guy Margulis was, they did nothing about it and never bothered trying to help Laust. To make things worse, they even made fun of his dumb-looking hair and his bland personality. They knew him then as the incompetent Laust and never gave him a second thought. Narsena is ready to shove her foot down this guy's throat, so she tells Marnell that bowing isn't enough. If he really wants to apologize, he should polish Laust's sword and kisses his stones. Marnell thinks that's going too far, but this just makes Narsena even more furious. It hardly compares to the years and years Laust had to put up with their disrespect, but it's a good start. Laust, trying to avoid being cancelled for forcing someone to polish his sword, says that none of that is necessary. The truth is he's still incompetent when it comes to healing and not much has changed. And he would actually prefer it if they just kept hurling insults at them. The two shake on it, and it feels like all the tension evaporates from the guild hall, giving our heroes the chance to sell off their sweet loot. Amherst stares at the magical stone they've brought her, and like every woman I've ever shown my Pokemon collection to, she is in awe how big and weird it is. Laust suspects its strange shape as a result of the monster's mutation, and Narsena is worried it will affect the price. It turns out that she's right. The guild is willing to pay 10 times or more what they normally would for something so valuable and rare. The fact that it mutated at all is of some concern, though. Monster shouldn't be absorbing enough mana to change it like that outside of the labyrinth. The other scattered reports of monsters acting strangely only compounds Laust's suspicion that something is going on, and he asks why the guild doesn't just send someone to investigate. Before Amherst can answer, Mr. Hansam arrives, giving off some real main character vibes despite just being the guy in charge of the guild. He tells the pair to join him in his office, and after going over the reports, mentions that monsters transforming is rare but not unheard of. Hansam explains that he's too good-looking to deal with such trivial matters, and if Laust is afraid, then maybe it's time for the healer to leave this town once and for all. Narsena is more than a little annoyed by Mr. Stick-Up-His-Butt, and Amherst says that's just the kind of guy he is. She then brings up Mr. Mist, the actual president of the guild. A man so old he can hardly leave his own office, and he often stumbles while going upstairs. With Mr. Mist's obvious mental decline, and without having to go through a competitive selection process, Hansam is taken on the president's duties. He has a reputation among the other guild employees as being strict and no-nonsense. Laust isn't into all the workplace gossip, so he has to be showing all the available quests. Narsena is appalled by how paltry some of them are, like this one where some guy just wants to go fishing in the underground lake of the labyrinth and needs an escort. Amherst, eager to collect more racks, reminds her that every job with the reward is a job worth doing. Laust comes across a mission to defeat a bunch of monsters. Narsena jumps at the idea of a worthy mission, but Amherst says that it's a no-go. It turns out that a phoenix is lurking dangerously close to a teleportation circle they would have to go through. The quest would earn them a ton of coin, but a healer and a martial artist trying to fight a phoenix is suicide. They don't have long-range attacks, so in order for them to accept the quest, they would need to have at least a warrior, a mage, and a healer that can actually use area heals. If they're really interested in defeating the beast and claiming the massive reward, the two of them are going to need help. Our two heroes become excited when they realize that they know the three perfect adventurers who recently formed the party. Lyra and Zyge are interested in the job, with Lyra having the audacity to whisper about Laust right in front of him, as if he has lost his hearing. She tells Zyge that this is a good chance to observe the banished healer, since that was his reason for sticking around in the first place. They then asked Armia what she thinks, but the little wizard is too busy wondering why the life choices have led to her joining these losers. Armia decides to just do what they think is best and says that she just surprised that Laust would ever want to team up with her again after she top 10 anime betrayed him. Our hero's quick to forgive and forget, and he holds no ill will towards his old teammate. They have only the future to look forward to now, and that future involves teaming up to kick some phoenix butt. The gangs get to work getting prepared for the next day, from dealing with guild paperwork to rounding up supplies and buying the necessary equipment. Laust tells Narsena we're on their way to grab some potions, when she is suddenly hugged from behind by a shirtless stranger. Freaking out of fighters, a good way to get launched across the street, and Narsena breaks free and takes a swing only to realize that someone she knows. Miss Ralma calls herself a top-notch enchanter and adventurer known as the Fire God, a terrible nickname that she picked for herself. Narsena is surprised at seeing an older acquaintance, is quickly replaced with suspicion when she asks whether Ralma was sent by her father. Ralma confirms that she was sent by Narsena's father, seeing as his favorite child ran off on her own to elope with some random boy. However, what is surprising is that Narsena isn't the only one who knows Ralma. When the redhead notices that some boy they were talking about, she's surprised to realize that it's her old, useless student Laust. As it turns out, he trained under her for a short time, but his lack of skill made them part ways. As for Narsena, Ralma is an old friend of her father's. With that exciting context out of the way, Ralma asked the healer for a moment alone with Narsena. They need to discuss some important family matters which doesn't involve an outsider like him. Laust grows a spine of nowhere and he refuses to leave. Narsena is important to him because they are partners and he's not some outsider. If Ralma is here to take her back to her father like he suspects, then he isn't going anywhere. Relm is amused by her former disciple's brazenness and asked if he thinks he can really stop her. Laust tells her to just try, so the legendary god of flames sends out the slowest fireball in enemy history from the tip of her fork. Laust dodges it with the ease, and the fire's only victim is someone else's turkey leg. Narsena tries to calm things down by explaining that she didn't really run away so much as she just kind of forgot to tell anyone she was leaving. She did leave a note, though, one that simply said that she was leaving to go find her big brother Laust, and she told them not to be worried. For some reason, she thought her father would be completely relieved to hear that his young, impressionable daughter was running off without a word to go chasing a strange man. Ralma demands an explanation for her utterly odd behavior, and Narsena hesitates because the truth is a little awkward. Understandably, Narsena is too embarrassed to reveal that she had spies watching Laust for a long time. Eyes and ears that not only reported his whereabouts and actions, but the fact that he had been kicked out of Lightning Blade. Like any good stalker, Narsena saw her chance and she took it. Laust, seeing how uneasy his partner is, tells her that maybe she should go see her dad, especially because in order to be an adventurer you need your parents' permission. Narsena is more than a little hurt and scared to hear him say that, mostly because her father might say no and the two of them may never see each other again. Ralma clears things up by saying that her father doesn't have a problem with his daughter becoming an adventurer, he was just worried that she would come back with a loser boyfriend. All her father wants to know is if his little girl is safe and that she isn't eating an anime recap viewer. From what Ralma can tell, Narsena is fine, and she tells Narsena to leave it to her to convince her father. With that out of the way, the fire god asked her stupid apprentice to get her some wine so the girls can have her private talk about him. As his former teacher, she wonders why Narsena is so captivated by such an incompetent man like him, but Narsena speaks up for Laust. She defends him by going over his many strengths and skills she witnessed firsthand since partying up with him. He is strong, wise, and thoughtful, but most of all, Laust is a good man. One who puts others before himself, others like Narsena, whom he has been doing everything in his power to guide and help gain experience as an adventurer. Though she was the one that came to save him, she has come to realize, like we all have, that she is nothing but a burden, and the thought of it is more than she can handle. Taking this all in, Ralma explains that Laust has never speaked up for anyone in his entire life except for Narsena. He has changed because of her, and it seems like it's for the better. Ralma suggests the girls stick around with her healer friend for a while longer and visit two of them. Good luck on their journey. As for her, she has her own mission. Mr. Mist, the mysterious president of the guild, has some secrets that the fire god plans to bring to light. With preparations complete and all doubts cast aside, the team of Lyra the healer, Zyge the saber, Armia of the wizard, and of course our favorite incompetent healer and his fighter companion are assembled and ready. There is some poor phoenix out there that's going to get wrecked. The team teleports into the dungeon to begin their hunt, and Narsena is ready to throw hands the moment her feet touched the ground. It's on sight as far as she's concerned, but there's no phoenix waiting for them, not in such a narrow space. Making their way through the tight corridors, the gang is on the hunt. They know their fiery prey will prefer wide open spaces, more suited to such a large flying monster. The search comes to an end when they stumble out into a sprawling cavern. Lined with broken pillars and topped with the high ceiling, Armia and Narsena is surprised that even deep into the labyrinth there are such expansive spaces. Lyra recalls that this is likely the area she heard about. There is talk that a new path has been discovered nearby, a piece of the labyrinth that has not yet been explored by adventurers, and as every adventurer knows, at the end of every uncharted trail in the labyrinth is all the unclaimed treasure one could ever want. Lyra's enthusiasm is contagious, and the girls are excited at the thought of riches and glory, but Zyge reminds them that there's one problem. There's a big scary monster guarding the way. No one's managed to get past it yet, so the guild has placed a sizable bounty on its head. Laust's investigation of the area quickly uncover signs of burning amidst the rubble. He determines that this can only be the work of the phoenix. To test his idea, he takes the stone and tosses it deeper into the cavern. Its bouncing across the rock echoes throughout the dark expanses, fiercely territorial the moment the phoenix detects an intruder it will attack, and Laust is counting on it. On cue, the labyrinth lights up with the shining portal on the ceiling. Out flies a burning ball of fire that zips around the room, before unveiling its wings and taking flight. That phoenix has arrived and this battle is just heating up. Meanwhile, back at the guild hall, Amherst is busy doing nothing when the bikini-top warrior comes waltzing through the front door. Desperate as can be, Amherst welcomes the redhead to Mardat branch of the Adventurers Guild with a cheerful smile. Ralma is a little taken aback by how friendly the staff are here to the adventurers. Lying through her teeth, Amherst says that it's only natural for her to be nice to the adventurers. The truth is that the half-naked Ralma is the first woman she's seen, not just like a nun or a bank teller around this town. What little she is wearing is clearly made of fine material and even magical quality. Amherst knows expensive when she sees it, so whoever this redhead is, she's certainly worth knowing. Amherst thinks of her as a target to make boatloads of money off her, so she offers to help Ralma any way she can. Ralma wastes no time and asks to see the branch president. Amherst is a bit concerned, so she asks if Ralma has an appointment, but she doesn't. She asks Ralma if she has a recommendation from someone, but she doesn't have that either. Amherst asks to perhaps Ralma, as the president's daughter or maybe granddaughter, but once again that's a no. Ralma reveals that she's just here to beat the crap out of old Mr. President and ends his life. Amherst is definitely not letting this crazy broad see him, and she can't believe that Ralma thought she would be allowed to just kill the guild master. Their argument catches everyone's attention and they get to witness the fire god lose her temper. She's just going to burn down the whole place and see what crawls out of the ashes. Thankfully, Hansam, the hero wannabe, is also there. He catches Round off guard and calms things down back to room temperature. He knows exactly who she is and what she's capable of. Hansam believes that a civil conversation in his office might be for the best. In the labyrinth of high ridges on against the phoenix, but the team finds themselves frustrated with the bird's ability to fly. Apparently, they've been known to do that sometimes. Laust is so flustered he's even dreaming of what it would be like to abandon his chad sword and pick up a bow for once. Narsena at least comforted by the fact that as long as the phoenix stays out of range it can't hurt them. They might not be able to attack it, but it can't attack them either. Insulted after hearing this, the phoenix fires off of both the flame at the blue-haired bimbo who dares to invade its space. However, Laust rescues her from the resulting explosion just in time. If it wasn't obvious, he explains that his beak, talons, and burning hotbod aren't the only weapons that Phoenix has at its disposal. Its most dangerous attacks are its balls of fire. No one is more disappointed than Narsena because she has no way to punch it to death now. Back at the guild, Ralma has questions for the acting president, and Hansam mentioned she isn't the only one recently. He recalls that Laust was here not too long ago with concerns about the labyrinth and the strange behavior of the monsters that are inside. And some explains that Laust was being a crybaby, so he told the loser to get lost. Fortunately for the plot of this story, that's not going to work on the fire god. Ralma just wants to know why the town's population is made up of thugs and miscreants. Even the guild hall feels like a Batman villains conference, with so many shady types around. Ralma knows it must have been the guild who invited them here in the first place, and now she wants to know why. Also, she wants to know what the deal is with the mysterious and definitely ritual-related pillars all around town. Woman's intuition and common sense both tell her that there's something fishy going on here, and there's no way he doesn't know the truth. Or worse, she suspects that Hansam could be behind all the lies. In a small, vibrant town like Mardat, the guild has absolute authority. That means that the man in charge of the guild is basically the king of the town. King Hansam denies everything and pleads the fifth. He claims he has no idea what's going on or what she's rambling about. He is merely a humble and ignorant guild president, and as he puts it, he's basically a sidekick. Ralma gets annoyed as she has had enough of him playing dumb. She comes right out and accuses him of filling the town with lowlives to scare away respectable adventurers. Adventurers with pesky questions who might wonder what's going on in the guild. She speculates that he doesn't want anyone to find out about a transmutation circle hidden around the town, maybe because soon something big will happen that will require the sacrifice of numerous adventures, preferably those who won't be missed when they're gone. She compares it to something called the Labyrinth Rampage, a terrible event that occurred in the past and whose memory still haunts the world. Back with the team, the labyrinth has turned into a battlefield as the Phoenix continues to launch fireballs that are heroes from afar. Lyra is concerned that if they aren't blown to smithereens first, the fires will burn off all the oxygen in the cavern before they can stop the monster. As for Laust, he realizes that this Phoenix is pretty clever. Since it's outnumbered, it's trying to drive them off with a rather thoughtful tactic. It's covering the room and a sea of fire to burn them alive, but it's also using the fire to consume all the oxygen in the room. Laust points out that they're up against the Einstein of Phoenixes, and Zyge is offended by the idea of a monster that can actually use its brain. He's tired of hiding and calls out to Armia asking if she can use water magic. It's definitely something he should have asked before they threw themselves into a fight with the Phoenix, but luckily she can. The plan they come up with is simple. Armia will down the Phoenix with their water magic by attacking its wings. Once grounded, the rest of them will jump it and kick its butt. It takes a long time to cast magic strong enough to harm a Phoenix, and after everything the little mage has been through recently, it's no surprise she's a bit shaken by the idea. Zyge, who always radiates main character energy, reminds her that he'll be there fighting at her side, and nothing will harm her so long as he stands. The fact is, she's got a whole party of trustworthy companions to rely upon. Lyra, Narsena and Laust are all in this together, and as long as they're a team, she's got nothing to worry about. These words inspire Armia, so the team begins the attack. Those on the front line take off, drawing the Phoenix's attention, while Armia and Lyra hang back, preparing the crucial magic they'll need. Calling forth an arrow of water, the little mage launches it at the Phoenix, managing to douse one of its wings. Charging the falling monster, Zyge is intent on driving his save her home, but the cut is too shallow. Back at the guild hall, the verbal duel between Ralma and Hansam continues. Ralma explains that all signs point to a rampage on the horizon, and she doesn't want to hear any denial about the obvious problems surrounding the labyrinth. The mana on these parts is out of control, and monsters are mutating left and right. Back with our heroes, the Phoenix is DG evolving before the team's very eyes. It's another amazing monster transformation that changes the Phoenix into a slightly larger Phoenix. Mutations like these are meant to be rare, but Armia finds herself facing off against yet another one right after the last one. The terrible luck is too much for the young girl, and she begins to panic. Lyra can't believe that this kid didn't learn the lesson from the dragon. Fear only feeds the beast. As soon as the Phoenix detects her terror, it pounces, aiming to engulf in flames. Lyra grabs her and tries to run for cover, but it's too late. The blue fires upon them, and there's nowhere and no time left to hide. Just when it seems like the girls are about to become those blue flaming hot taquitos, Zyge arrives to save them. The swordsman keeps his promise, Flash stepping into the fire's path, slicing it apart before it can reach Armia. Zyge declares that he won't let the bird lay its wings on her, and he deflects more balls of fire with his blade. Zyge then calls out to the mage, telling her to find the courage to stand. If they are to have any hope of felling this monster, it will be because of her magic. Lyra lends a hand, but the little mage tells the girl that has been by her side this entire anime that she doesn't need her help. If she doesn't have the strength to stand up on her own, then how can she ever be expected to support her teammates? Back with the Flame God, she leaves the guild frustrated and without answers. She decides to take her irritation out on one of the pillars around the town, but the white stone merely absorbs and dissipates her flames. Her attack would have been super useful in this fight against the Phoenix, but for the time being, the team will have to do what they can, and what Narsena can do is punch things. She delivers her best jab to the Phoenix, but she's no Tyson, and the monster retreats unharmed. Narsena, on the other hand, has caught on fire and she runs around losing her mind. Looking for revenge after getting sucker punched in the beak, the Phoenix uses talents on Narsena, but Laust intercepts the attack with his sword. The flames are really strong though, and their very steel is melted. Things aren't looking so good, but Armia has had all the time she needed. With the healer boosting her, Armia summons Ice Arrow, a sweet-looking next-level spell that is sure to bring the Phoenix down. The attack lands, and the bird's wing is blown apart, but it's not enough to ground it. It is however flying much lower now, low enough for Narsena to throw herself back into the ring. She leaps up the rubble of a pillar to gain enough altitude so she can bring her foot down hard on the Phoenix's head. It's an attack that catches it completely off guard and slams it hard back to the earth. This is their opportunity, one that Laust doesn't waste. Driving his blade home, our Banished healer delivers the final blow and defeats the Phoenix with one swift stab. In the aftermath, the team can't help but be impressed with their little mage teammate. She really pulled through for them, and their congratulations brings Armia to tears. All she needed was a good group of friends she could call her party. Lyra just glad that Laust didn't go into his dark Super Saiyan mode, but Zyge decides that he will still have to keep his eye on our hero. Afterwards, they return to the tavern in Mardat for a round of celebratory drinks. There they find Ralma waiting for them, where she has been drinking enough for all of them. She's been waiting for the group, and Laust is surprised that she knew where to find them. Apparently, Amherst sold them out without hesitation when Ralma threw a few coins her way. Amherst is clearly a gold digger, which is bad news for Laust because he's going to make bank off the bounty from the Phoenix. Ralma suggests he buy another round of golden elixir, but he offers to get her some food instead so she can sober up. Unlike Narsena, who can't get enough of its rustic charm, the food around here isn't exactly up to Ralma's taste. Sheila, the tavern waitress in training, overhears her and she isn't happy about it. The look she gives them makes it clear that their next order will come with some of her special seasoning. Narsena actually likes the food, and Ralma isn't surprised, seeing as Narsena only knows the rich life back at her family's mansion. The others are shocked to learn that Narsena belongs to a famously wealthy family, and no one is more blown away than Laust. Narsena, the daughter of Earl Annalus Rocha, and she's the same little girl he rescued all those years ago. Back at the president's lair, he and Hansam are discussing recent events. More mutations, more problems, but most troubling of all is the appearance of the fire god Ralma. The president doesn't seem worried at all, however. In fact, he's happy she's finally arrived. He's going to need his disciples' help, dealing with Ralma very soon. The next day, Narsena was very disappointed with how small Laust's sack is. Their reward this time isn't as good as before, and she expresses her immense dissatisfaction to Amherst, who sits patiently behind the counter. They just took down a whole phoenix, so there's no way this paltry reward is enough. The magic stone they pulled from it alone was bigger than the coin purse they've been given, and she points out that the phoenix even mutated. Amherst is getting a little annoyed at this blue-haired Karen, but Narsena isn't done yet. She points out that it was Amherst who told them to come back today to collect their earnings because she needed time to gather it all, and yet she ends up giving them so little. There's no wrath like the wrath of a woman cheated, and Narsena was about to have a "let me speak to your manager" moment. However, Amherst simply smiles and asks her to check the reward. Narsena unties the coin purse, and all her doubts and complaints instantly wash away in the light of so much gold. Nothing ends a complaint quite like a sack of gold, and Amherst explains that the amount of silver and copper coins she needed to pay them would be too much for the pair to even carry, so she went out of her way to get them paid in style. Laust steps in and tells Narsena to take the money, much to her embarrassment. He slides Amherst to her hefty manager fee and she snatches it up. Laust is already turned and left. She notices his strange mood and asks Narsena what's the deal with him, but she doesn't have an answer. The town is bustling with people today, and in the market square the children gather around to watch a puppet show. As the storyteller sets the mood with some music, he spins him a heroic tale. In the lurking depths of that dark labyrinth, there's an evil dragon whose greed claims everything for itself. Every 200 years, this insatiable beast would awaken, plundering and burning, and generally doing other evil dragon things. Yet there was one who stood against its tyranny, the mighty hero. The epic battle would decide the fate of the world, and the storyteller as his captive audience, who they think will win. Nearby, Laust and Narsena have sat down to a pleasant meal, but things are off between the two of them. Narsena wasn't sure what to say, so she brings up the reward. Surely with so much coin they could consider renting a house for themselves. Laust is a little shocked by how sudden this all is, but Narsena reminds him that this has been a long time coming. Renting a proper house just makes sense. It's practical and easier than spending their days at a hotel. At least that's what Amherst told her. She's done some research of her own and knows that they can afford not just to rent, but buy something for themselves outright. The idea of a woman handling the finances offends Laust's manly sensibilities, and he asks Narsena if she is uncomfortable at Miss Mary's place. Considering she's standing right there in the background, Narsena makes the wise decision to say that there couldn't be a better hotel in town. The food there is fantastic and the beds are comfy, but that's the problem. Because it's so nice, everyone wants to stay there, which means every day they must deal with the noisy crowds of strangers that come and go. Laust has to agree, which is enough to raise your hopes and send Narsena into a daydream about just the two of them sharing a cozy house in the countryside together. Sitting by the fire drinking tea, Narsena dreams of having a nice long talk with Laust. She imagines herself talking with him long into the night and talking multiple times if necessary. The idea of it has her dancing in her seat, but Laust burst her bubble when he says it's just too early. He's a winner after all, and only losers develop plot, so they'll just have to keep on living in separate rooms at the hotel. He thinks it's more important for them to save their money as well as think about some big questions they have to answer, like what about forming a party. The only reason they managed to beat that phoenix in the first place was because of the help they received, and Sieg already asked them to officially join forces. Narsena asked why he can't stop mentioning Sieg, but who can blame him? He's a man among men, strong and charming and handsome, and his sword is huge. Whatever the case, will Sieg, Lyra, and Armia in their party, they'd be able to delve deep into the labyrinth. Narsena was clearly frustrated that the labyrinth is the only thing he's trying to delve deep into. At the hotel, the gang gathers around an amazing dinner to celebrate the formation of their new party. By the end of party, poor Armia tuckered out and Lyra have volunteers to take her back to her room. At this point, Laust must have noticed that the two were always whispering around him, when Lyra Quality tells Sieg that this is his chance to get to know their mysterious healer friend a little better. As the girls go to leave, Narsena follows after them. She has some things to discuss with Lyra, girl to girl. Up in Armia's room, the young mage fast asleep, but the other two are far from it. Lyra shocked by how desperate Narsena is for Laust's attention, but the blue-haired fighter tells her to shut up. The whole hotel doesn't need to know her business. However, she does need Lyra's advice. Laust rejected her offer to live together, and now she doesn't know what to do or how to feel. Lyra comforts her by saying Laust absolutely adores her, and the reason he said no could be anything. He might be shy or slow to change or just downright stupid, and she says that men are like that sometimes. Narsena is glad she went to Lyra for advice because she's exactly the kind of cougar she needed to help her with her problem. She's been prowling around men so long, there's nothing she doesn't know about them. Lyra says she can relate because she's been thirsting for someone for a long time now as well. Downstairs, Laust and Sieg are discussing the same thing over a mug of wine. The healer doesn't know if buying a house is the right idea, and Sieg brings up how Narsena must have felt asking him and being turned down like that. He wonders if Laust hates her, but there's no way anyone can not like the best girl, Narsena. When they first met, she was the one who gave him the courage he needed to be the adventurer he is today, and then she was the only one who dared to form a party with Laust after his old team threw him away like trash. Sieg then just comes out and asks if Laust liked Narsena. Our boy turns red with embarrassment and he can't manage to get a word out, which is enough of an answer for Sieg. Sieg is the very topic of the conversation upstairs, as the girls talk about the time Lyra and he first met. She talks about her past in the royal capital and how the two of them were part of the same party at first. She humble brags about being the prettiest, and how that often led to trouble with the men who joined the party just to get close to her. Someone mentions that even Margulis from her old team wanted to jump her bones too, and the girls realize that Armia is awake. After hearing all this juicy romance gossip, there's no way the mage could sleep. The girls are both eager for Lyra to continue with their story, and she recounts a time when Sieg and the others had left, and one of her more disgraceful teammates tried to take things too far. Naturally, she took care of herself, but when Sieg returned he was different. He took his frustration out on the fool, but then up and left the party too. Sieg himself explains why he had to disappear like that. Lyra may have forgiven him for letting someone like that into their team, but he never forgave himself. He had no idea what he was supposed to do, so he ended up falling back on the one thing he understood. He took a job to investigate a small town with some monster troubles, and here he was. He never expected to run into Lyra again so soon. A voice asked if Lyra really does like Siege, and the girls realized that the little gremlin Sheila has broken into the room to deliver the food they ordered. Back with the boys, Sieg asks Laust what he plans to do. The healer explains that before he can make any decisions, he needs to see the Carfax on this girl. This is when Amherst comes in as she orders herself a beer and drops the report Laust ordered. Apparently snooping is a little side gig Amherst runs, and he hired her to do some digging into Narsena's past. We then return to the puppet show for the shocking climax of the tale. The hero has fallen, and it seems like the evil dragon has all but won. That is until the Sleeping Beauty appears, wielding the only power that could subdue the dragon and return the beast to its slumber. Amherst goes over what they already knew about Narsena. She's a rich girl from a rich family that was bound to inherit everything, until one day she declared that she was going to be a broke adventurer instead. It's not unheard of for nobility to become adventurers, but it's still weird that her father would allow such a thing. It turns out that he did not at first. Narsena explains to her girls that her hair is in some cheap dye job. She used to be blonde until waking up one day to find that her hair had changed color without any kind of explanation. It's the reason that Laust couldn't recognize her. Amherst continues saying that the day Narsena's hair changed color was the day her father changed his mind about her becoming an adventurer. Laust is clueless and can't understand the change of heart. Luckily, Sieg's there to put it plainly. He says that Narsena won't live much longer. Her blue hair must represent the short time she has left, so her father must have wanted her to live her best life before the end. Amherst can't be sure though, because Narsena is the kind of girl who punches phoenixes for a living, so she doesn't know exactly look like someone who's about to kill over. Laust's plan now is to have her return home at least one more time. If Narsena still wants to be an adventurer after that, he will keep supporting her like he's always done. For her part, Laust has done a lot to get to this point, and she did it all for a boy she liked. The other girls are kind of creepy talkers as well, so they're impressed at how proactive she is. Even Lyra is a little jealous, which sparks an idea in the others. Dragged downstairs by the other girls, Lyra forced to ask Sieg if he has a moment to talk. Alone on the patio, she asked him to be her partner, but she says that they're already on the same team. Lyra has to explain things plainly to the doofus, who finally gets it in the end. His only answer to her request is that he'll have to think about it. It's not the answer she was hoping for, but just thinking about a relationship is progress, and she's happy enough with that. Overhearing all this, Laust finds the courage to ask Narsena to come speak with them later. Back at the puppet show, we see the dramatic conclusion to the story of the hero, the dragon and the Sleeping Beauty who saves the world. To stop the evil monster, the Sleeping Beauty must sacrifice herself. As the show comes to an end, we see that the puppet has some very familiar blue hair. In the depths of the dungeon, a hulking half-orc patrols the dark hallways in search of prey. Unbeknownst to the orc, a group of adventurers watches from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to make their move. Once it has passed, the group tries to sneak away, only to run into a second monster blocking their path. The adventurers begin to panic, worried about getting caught in between the two beasts. The leader of the group tells the others not to lose their cool because he has a plan. He calls over the youngest member of their team, a boy called Keith, and says that it's his chance to shine. Everyone knows that half-orcs can resist weak people, so the others chuck Keith out into the open to serve as the perfect distraction while they bravely run away. In Mardit's hotel, Narsena is strangely observing a sausage while thinking about Laust. Lyra and Sieg notice how preoccupied their martial arts friend is and get on Laust's case for causing this. Ever since he mentioned that he needed to talk to her about something very important, the girl has been super distracted. They tell our hero that he needs to get on with it already and just say what he has to say. In the end, Laust ends up agreeing. He tells Narsena that it's time to have their conversation, but the plot has different plans as Keith comes crashing through the front door. Sheila and the others rush to the poor boy's side, horrified by how battered and bruised he is. Lyra and Sheila then take Keith to a room to help heal them back to health. Narsena asks how Sheila knows him, and Miss Mary explains that the two of them are quite good friends. They have been ever since Mary learned Keith was an orphan, and she started inviting him over for meals. Like most children made orphans by the labyrinth, Keith wanted to become an adventurer and was quite excited recently to have joined the party. Laust has heard this story before and apologizes to Narsena because they're going to have to put a hold on their talk for now. Later that day at the Adventurers Guild, Marnell and his party have managed to catch Keith's former teammates. He tells Laust that the bounty he placed on their heads worked, and the criminals have confessed to the crime. The look Laust gives the three treacherous adventurers sends a shiver down their spines, and Marnell asks what he wants to do with them. Laust says there's no need for further violence, he just wants them out of this town for good. Marnell cuts them free, but with a warning: if they ever show their faces in Mammoth again, they'll get much worse than a bump on their heads. As they flee off into the sunset, Amherst appears and tries to scold Laust and Marnell for their vigilante justice. Marnell rightfully points out that they wouldn't need to dish out their own law and order if the guild would just do its job and regulate the adventures like it's supposed to. Amherst finds that hard to argue with and says that it's just how things are. She can only follow the orders of the higher-ups. As if on cue, Hansam steps out and confronts the group. He lays into the adventurers for doing what they like and not reporting their grievances to the guild. He even goes so far as to say that they're the ones who deserve to be banished for their actions. His words rile up the adventurers he's talking down to, and they start yelling and cursing at him. They even threaten to kick his butts if he has the nerve to say it again. Laust calms the group down and says that he'll talk to Hansam personally and get this all sorted out. In Hansen's office, Laust explains what has happened to Keith. He tries to explain that a labyrinth town and its orphans are inseparable. One has to take care of the other, something they do in every guild town except this one for some reason. Hansam counters by wondering if any other town has managed to solve their orphan problem. When Laust doesn't have a good answer, Hansam goes on to say that Mardat isn't a well-off settlement. They don't have the resources or manpower to waste on untested and inefficient solution like other towns do. His answer sounds like utter nonsense to Laust, who's getting heated, and Hansam complete disregard. As usual, the head of the guild response is that if they or anyone else doesn't like how things are done in Mardat, they are free to get the heck out of there. No one is being forced to go into the labyrinth or become adventurers in the first place. The frustrated Laust demands to know if there's some other way to solve this besides running away, and Hansam mentions redemption. He then recounts something once said to him long ago, and that is that adventurers always live in danger, the incompetent deserve to die. This is how it is and how it has always been. The word sounds strangely familiar to Laust, but he can't place where it's from. He gets his answer when Hansam reveals the scar in his arm and asks Laust if he even remembers him. Laust is stunned to realize that Hansam is actually the same boy named Nogzum he knew long ago. Flashing back to the past, we joined a young Hansam on the trail with a group of adventurers. He's weighed down by tons of bags and equipment as the others use him like a pack mule. One of the heartless adventurers tosses one more pack onto him and the weight knocks him over. Their leader mocks Nogzum for being incompetent and warns the boy that if he can't even manage to carry their stuffs, he's not going to get paid at all. As they laugh and leave him in the dirt, young Laust walks up and gives Nogzum a hand with his burden. He asks if the boy is all right and offers to help, but Nogzum too proud to accept it, and he storms off. By the time the sun has set, the group has settled down around the campfire. That is, except for Nogzum and Laust, who have to sit alone in the cold in the dark while they keep watch. Nogzum mutters to himself that he won't end up a loser like Laust and vows to become a great adventurer one day. Soon the group calls it a night and goes to bed. Later that night Nogzum is awoken and he cries out that he didn't fall asleep on watch. Luckily for him, it was only Laust waking him up. The young healer hushes Nogzum and says that he needs to warn the others because there are goblins coming. Once everyone is up on their feet, they interrogate Laust about the goblins, demanding to know how many there are. Unfortunately, he explains that their number is too great to count. Overlooking the horde of monsters, the leader of the group recognizes that they have no chance of winning if they engage, but he tells the others not to worry because he has a plan. Everyone knows goblins can't resist weak people, so they toss Laust and Nogzum down the cliff to serve as the perfect distraction while they bravely run away. Nogzum can't believe what's happening and starts yelling back up the cliff, but Laust tells them that there's no one there. This was simply how it was always going to be. The adventurers only ever hired them to carry their junk and use them as bait. Laust tells him he's going to get out of this alive and get some payback, and Nogzum has strength to be angry. He has enough strength to get himself out of this mess. The pair draw their weapons, introducing themselves as they prepare for the fight of their lives. The boys manage to escape and hide in the trunk of an old tree. However, they're completely surrounded by goblins with no means of escape. Laust asked if Nogzum's injury is bad, but he waves them off and says it's just a scratch. Feeling angry and defeated, Nogzum says that at least they won't die incompetent. This is because they managed to serve as a great distraction for those bustard in the end. Laust, on the other hand, isn't so sure that their evil teammates managed to get away. He explains that when goblins hunt in large packs like this, they prefer taking on big groups instead of wasting their time with stragglers. His words end up being prophetic as the screams of the adventurers can be heard in the distance, drawing the goblins away. Nogzum laughs as he listens to the people who betrayed them get their just desserts. Laust actually says that he'd like to help if he can, and Nogzum can't believe what he's hearing. Regardless, they can't actually do anything now, so the two decide to leave while they can. Nogzum's injuries stops him in his tracks, however, and Laust runs over to heal him. Nogzum tells him not to be a fool. Laust has to run before the goblins return, but the healer isn't having any of it. This is when we hear those familiar words spoken by Hansam. He said that the incompetent deserve to die and the weak have no right to live. Laust snaps and says that the world doesn't work like that. It doesn't matter if they're weak, there's always the chance that one day they can redeem themselves. Nogzum asks how he could possibly know that, and Laust tells them that it's because he was once redeemed himself. Back in the present, Nogzum, now known as Hansam, says that his words were true back then. The world is harsh to the incompetent, But it wasn't he and Laust who were incompetent. It was their treacherous teammates who didn't understand the nature of the goblins. The two of them survived because those adventurers were weak. He goes on to explain that after they went their separate ways, he was eventually taken in by Mist, the president of the guild branch for this town. Laust congratulates his old companion on managing to do so well for himself, but Hansam isn't bringing up past just to talk about the good old days. He mentions all this so he can return the favor Laust once showed him. He tells the healer to leave because it's the best thing he can do for himself. He should also take that girl Narsena with him, since she was the one that Laust must have been talking about when he mentioned being redeemed. With their negotiations going nowhere, Laust turns to Marnell and the others and apologizes. He says that he has accomplished nothing, but Amherst calls the two of them over for a quick chat in the storage room. Squeezed into the cramped private space, she whispers that they aren't the only ones upset with the way the guild is handling things. We then cut to the scene when Laust explains to Narsena what Amherst told him. She suggested the clearing of the monsters that have infested in nearby lands around the town. Narsena asks why the guild hasn't issued bounties for these monsters, but as Amherst puts it, Hansam and Mist just don't seem to care. She said she would cover for them while they deal with the monsters on their own. She will also do her best to make sure that the right people hear about what's going on in this town without getting caught. They just have to deal with the monster threat in the meantime. Having heard all this, Narsena complains that they always have to work extra hard. Laust tells her not to worry because Amherst has promised to buy the magic stones they loot at a higher price by paying with their own money. Laust and Marnell were shocked to hear the greedy Amherst say that, but she quieted them down with a knock on the head. Their promise of more money perks Narsena right up and she's rearing to go. Leaving the hotel, they find Keith and a number of other kids training with Sieg and Lyra. The young boy seems to be completely healed, and though Lyra would like to take all the credit, she admits that Keith is one tough kid. Sieg calls an end to the sword training and declares that now is the time to practice the sacred art of punching things, and no one is a better teacher than Narsena. Lyra asked if Laust has finally had that talk with Narsena yet, but the healer bashfully admits that he completely forgot. Thankfully, it at least seems that Narsena is back to her old self again. Meanwhile, Hansam reports to Mr. Mist, handing him a letter from the capital. The letter's from the Prime Minister himself, and it instructs them to keep an eye on Narsena, just like all the other letters have before it. Hansam has to ask, is Narsena really the sleeping beauty who will save them all from the evil dragon, as described in all the fairy tales? Mist informs him that those aren't just children's stories. The tale of the blue-haired girl sacrificing herself to stop the dragon is actually real. Narsena is the chosen one fabled to save them all. And with that, we have come to the end of this part. Stay tuned for next part. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive all the latest updates.